And people sometimes alienate themselves from the help because they say, oh, I don't have chronic pain. I'm just tired all the time. Or I don't have chronic pain. I just don't have a joy for life. Or I don't have chronic pain. Just everything feels like too much all the time. And so I just want to open this conversation before I even start talking about myself by saying there is no cure for the human condition and there is no cure for human pain. But there is a cure for chronic pain, emotional and physical of all kinds.
Hey, Heal Squad and fans of Better Together with Maria Menounos. I am not Maria Menounos. I'm Mr. Maria Menounos, a.k.a. Kevin Undergaro, subbing for my beautiful wife, who continues to do her thing, get stronger, keep mom with us as long as we can. I'm really excited for today's show, for personal reasons, but I think it's going to speak to everybody. I'll start out with our little quote. Our physical issues bring us to the precepts of the truths that have been awaiting our acknowledgement. And that is from Nicole Sachs. Nicole Sachs, if you were wondering, Kelsey, is a speaker, a writer, and psychotherapist who has dedicated her life and practice to the treatment of emotional and physical chronic pain and conditions. It was Nicole's own journey through extreme chronic pain and a condition doctors said was hopeless that led her on the path to the revelation that there was more to her pain than just physical. Nicole discovered how her emotional pain and deep-seated personal issues were the root of the problem. This discovery led her to near miraculous healing and on the path to helping heal others without stigmas, medication, or even surgery. The Heal Squad and Better Together welcome Nicole Sachs. Hi, Nicole.
Hey, happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So, Nicole, I think we have to start by you telling us your story with chronic pain and, what brought you to this revelation. And I just want to say that anyone out there that has any kind of chronic condition, I have many friends right now who, if they don't have breast cancer, they've got, like I have, some thyroid issue. And if they don't have those issues, I know people with chronic rashes. And if they don't have those issues, I know people who have, Kelsey right here has a chronic stomach issue that we on the show have been working the last 3 months, really focusing on trying to fix. And when I heard your interview, I'm like, Kelsey needs to listen to what Nicole says because I agree. And I think that all the way to people who haven't gotten their periods, and I know a lot of people who haven't been able to get pregnant. I think one of the reasons Maria couldn't get pregnant is because of what Nicole is going to talk about. But really, she's really going to take you on the journey to really help you to discover the roots of your conditions. And she'll tell you how many cases. Maybe it's in all cases. I don't want to, go out on a limb of an area I don't know. But I do know that there's more than just DNA or whatever you're eating or whatever's going on in your environment or, physically. There's things emotionally that are manifesting in our bodies that trigger these conditions, that signal our bodies to say something's wrong. And yes, you can treat the symptom in Western ways, and you may have to, but if you can really go to the core and the emotional root of this, you will find relief. And so Dr. Sano, if you're a fan of Howard Stern, as I was, he helped cure Howard's chronic back condition in this way. Yeah. So just a little bit of I'm going to lay it out as best I can, but please, everyone listen very carefully. If you suffer from any of those conditions or even other conditions, this is going to be a show that's going to help you so much, and a person who's going to help you so much. So Nicole, I'll let you take it from there, maybe starting with your story.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. There's so much to tell, and I'm going to tell my story. I just want to, in response to that beautiful intro, what I want to say is, when I first started my brand, which is called The Cure for Chronic Pain, I had to pick a name, I had to pick something. And people sometimes alienate themselves from the help because they say, oh, I don't have chronic pain. I'm just tired all the time. Or I don't have chronic pain. I just don't have a joy for life. Or I don't have chronic pain. Just everything feels like too much all the time. And so I just want to open this conversation before I even start talking about myself by saying, there is no cure for the human condition, and there is no cure for human pain. But there is a cure for chronic pain, emotional and physical of all kinds. because chronic pain is an epidemic of fear and misinformation and a misunderstanding of the connection between our mind and our body and the brain science that is derived from our nervous system and our fight or flight reactions. So I just said a huge mouthful that we're going to talk about a lot in this conversation, but I want people to understand before they could even possibly count themselves out that this is truly for every human being that walks the planet, because there's no cure for the human condition and we're all in it. So Perfect. I just had to put that out
No,
there.
I'm glad you said that, because you're right. Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. Because it's not just, my backache. It's these conditions. I'm sad. I'm depressed. I'm always so tired. Yeah.
Anxiety. And anxiety is everything. And anxiety manifesting in 100 different physical ways. So anyway, I'm going to put a pin in me and I'm going to tell my story, but I kind of always feel compelled to say that at the front end, because whomever you are listening to this is for you. Okay. So when I was a child, I was very type A, very goal-oriented, wanted to get the A. I had an incredibly critical father who I would say that I felt his love was very conditional at the time. He died when I was 27, so we've had plenty of time to make peace since then, and I feel a little bit more understanding. But in my childhood, his love felt very conditional, and I felt very pressured to be and do. And I had a lot of chronic issues as a child that were treated like the symptom. I had chronic constipation, so that was always an issue. I had stomach aches. I had anxiety. Sometimes I felt like I couldn't swallow, like I would feel like I'd have trouble swallowing. And pretty much when I was about 10 or 11, I remember in the mornings getting dressed and I would pull my pants on and my back would hurt when I stood up. And I thought, and I would say to my mom, my back hurts. I was 10 years old. And she would say, oh, growing pains, or, you're fine. Yeah. And I was fine. I was just slightly afflicted. And then I went to college. I was a freshman in college, and I had what I call in my business an acute pain incident. My back went out. I was just doing whatever I was doing. It was stressful. It was emotionally and physically stressful, being there, being away from home, all the pressures. And one day, I don't even remember the stimulus. I just bent over and I couldn't get back up. And it was very severe. My parents had to come to Lehigh, bring me home. I literally carry me. I don't think I could walk. And I was subject to all the tests, MRIs, x-rays. And the orthopedic surgery consult was very, very dark. And he threw up my x-ray on the screen and he looked at my mother and he said, she has a condition called acute degenerative spondylolisthesis, which is an abnormality of the lower spine. And he said, I'm about to deliver some very difficult news. There will be no more sports. There will be no more travel. There will be no more sleeping in any positions except for the fetal position, or if you're on your back, the legs must be elevated to at least 2 feet. Long rides in the car are no longer happening, because more than an hour with the bouncing motion of the car could lead to a horrible incident of acute pain. They put me on steroids. They put me on muscle relaxers, on opioid pain medications. And then he said, ultimately, the likelihood that I would have a biological child was slim to none unless I was prepared to have about 7 to 8 months of bed rest, because the weight of the baby on the front would put me in so much danger for the tenderness of my back situation. So here I am, 19 years old, being delivered a veritable death sentence of a life without very many possibilities at all. And, I do think, and I do have a very rich spiritual life and a connection to my spirituality, that even though I didn't back then, I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew that wasn't going to be my fate, but I didn't know why. And I just lived in fear. I listened to the doctors. I lived in fear. I stopped doing sports. I used to love riding horses. I was a rollerblader, it was the 90s. Mm-hmm. I stopped doing all the things that brought me joy. And I lived very small and very tight and in fear. And that went on. I lived in chronic pain. Sometimes it was better. Sometimes it was worse. And I got through undergrad. I moved to the city and I was working in the city and I got into grad school. So I moved to the Midwest and here I am in grad school. And one day my mother calls me and she is freaking out. And it was back when Rosie O'Donnell had her daily talk show in the 90s. And Rosie had a segment on the talk show, and it was called Fix Jeanette. And now Jeanette Barber, who was at the time Rosie's producer, was in a motorized wheelchair. She had such severe pain in her knees and her feet and her ankles. No doctor knew what to do for her, that she had devolved into this needing this motorized wheelchair. And Rosie, who wouldn't believe that there couldn't be one more idea, put her in this segment called Fix Jeanette. And my mother was watching the after segment, during which they showed footage of Jeanette Barber running the New York Marathon. And my mother said, "What's going on here?" And they started talking about a doctor named Dr. John Sarno, who helps people with all sorts of chronic conditions by explaining to them that the pain is not in your head. Okay, you're not making it up. It's not psychological pain. It's not psychosomatic pain. The pain is not in your head. It is real. It is being expressed through your body. But the origin of the pain lives in the mind-body system, and what happens to your brain and your nervous system when it is engaged in long-term chronic stress, long-term chronic fight or flight that leads to certain signals being sent to certain muscle groups and bodily systems like the stomach and the head and all the places we experience discomfort. So at the time, he was an attending physician for 50 years at the Rusk Center for Rehabilitation at NYU Medical Center. And over the course of his career, I think he had 4 or 5 best-selling books. But at the time, his most recent book was Healing Back Pain. And so my mom said, "You have to get this book. I think this is what's wrong with you." And I got the book. And to be totally honest, and whenever I speak, I always tell the truth. I didn't even read it. I read the front cover and the back, and I was, 25. I leafed through it and I said, "I get this. I understand what the man is saying." I got the gist of it. And what he was saying was, although pain is experienced through the body, when we have severe repressed feelings like rage, he always focused on rage. I've kind of evolved it into rage, shame, fear, sadness, regret, embarrassment, all the things we feel, grief. But when we experience repressed rage and we don't know how to let that steam valve open, it's going to be expressed somewhere in our bodies, and oftentimes rage is expressed through the back. This was his theory. So I thought, all right, it's probably crap, but let me just try it out. Because why not do a science experiment on myself? Because how else am I going to disprove my mother, which is always, a fun thing to do. And just I was curious. I allowed my fear to be replaced with curiosity, which is something I also teach a lot in my work. And I did a science experiment on myself. So I'll never forget, at the time I was in grad school and I was nannying for these 4 kids. And it was a stressful job. And once in a while, my back would really flare up. And so instead of worrying about my broken back and my ruined life and my terrible future, I just thought, why are you angry right now? And I thought, and I would go over whatever was going on with the kids or grad school or money or whatever was stressing me out. And I just really was honest with myself about why I was angry. And then 10 minutes later, I'd be busy doing an activity with the kids. And I'd be like, wait a second, what just happened here? My back doesn't hurt anymore. And that was the spark. That was the spark of recognition that there might be something to this mind-body connection, something I had never, ever considered in my life. We aren't in the Western world trained about any of this at all. Everything is take a pill, have a surgery, have an injection, or even if you're more maybe open-minded, have like a holistic treatment like acupuncture or a massage or whatever. And I'm not saying that those things are all wrong, and there's certainly a place for all of them in society. But most of the chronic conditions that we live with will never be fixed through physical manipulation of the body, ever. And now I'm 20 years in, so now I can speak with authority. But back then, I was just doing a science experiment on myself. So I became pain-free. And I went on to graduate with all my degrees. I got married, and I gave birth to my 2 oldest beautiful babies, exercising until the day they were born. I had no back pain. And that is a beautiful thing. And that is not the end of the story. And it's very important for people to understand that that's not the end of the story, because one of the things that I gently criticized my mentor and dear friend, Dr. John Sarno, about is that he used to say, oh, a lot of people, 90% of people read the book and get better. And I get it. I understand, because in many ways, the nervous system is a light switch. And when your nervous system perceives you as safe, your entire body functions differently than when it perceives you as in danger. So I do understand why people do get these book cures or this understanding of knowledge cures, but it's not the whole story. And I do believe that my story is as rich and as complicated as it is, so I could carry this message really fully to everyone out there who suffers. So my son, Oliver, who's now 16, was 10 months old, and he was in one of those those baby walkers, and he was toddling around my back deck. And there were 2 stairs that led from the deck to the driveway. It wasn't a huge fall, but every time he got a little close to it, I was like, I don't want him to go over those stairs. So I leaned over and I picked up the walker. Mm-hmm. Now I see you make a face because you think that that's bad for your back. It's actually not. I mean, it could be a muscle strain if you don't have a strong core, but it's not inherently bad for your back. However, obviously somewhere subconsciously, I thought it was. And moreover, my emotional reservoir that I now understand to be the keeper of your nervous system's perception of your safety was probably up to here.
You were worried about your son's safety in that moment, right? Was that?
I was worried about my son's safety. I'll put a hold on that, because I think what it was, that my son's safety and me picking it up was the trigger, but what it triggered was a lot more fear and anger and sadness and confusion that I didn't know about, because that's where our repressed emotional world lives, in our subconscious. I pick up the walker and it feels like I have a hot knife dragging through my back. And in that moment, fueled by fear, every understanding of the mind-body connection goes out the window. And I say, in total shame, you did it now. Now you did it. Bad girl, like your dad always said. You screwed up. You've ruined everything. You pressed your luck. You had these 2 kids. You probably shouldn't have, because you were told you weren't supposed to. And now your life is ruined. And that set me on a year, the darkest year of my life, of severe, severe chronic pain. 3 times a week physical therapy, electric stim treatments on my back, a lot of opioids, a lot of muscle relaxers, steroid packs, therapeutic massages, which always left me more in pain, which now I understand why. I was an angry mother. I was an impatient person. I was self-pitying all the time. And I lived in absolute despair. And it was that whole year. And then this year culminated in this one very fateful day where I was at a deli with my children. They were like 1.5 and 3.5. And it was the kind of deli that every mother dreads, because when you go up to pay at the front, there are all these like clear containers with gummy bears and gummy worms and chocolate covered pretzels. And they're all about the eye height of a 3-foot tall person, obviously by design. And so I'm trying to pay, and I've got the diaper bag over my shoulder, and I have a bad back. So I'm always feeling worried about myself and sorry for myself. And my kids are going wild. They are picking up the containers and shaking them and, Mommy, can I have this? Can I have this? And begging me and pulling at me and tripping. And the containers are falling on the floor. And I am mortified. And I'm all the things, the reservoir underneath. Don't know. All I know is I'm mortified. I wrench the stuff out of my kid's hands. I put it back. I pay the bill. And now we start walking to the parking lot. And this is a very active parking lot. Many stores, kind of like a strip mall. And as I'm walking to the car with one of my children in either of my hands, holding their hands, my back is getting tighter and tighter. The pain is getting bigger, and the fire in the lower back feels like it's going to explode. And I'm making sense that right now, this is a very serious situation that I'm in. I get to the car, and for the life of me, there was no way I could get my kids in the car. I couldn't reach my phone. I couldn't reach my keys. I couldn't let go of either of their hands, because 1 second of letting go could have meant that they would immediately be killed. There were cars whizzing by in either direction. They had no sense of danger. And I just stood there in the parking lot, and I put my forehead on the driver's side window of my car, and I just cried. I just cried from my poor children and their failure of a mother and my broken body and my ruined life and all of my hope that had drained from me, I just cried and I just stood there. And to this day, every time I tell the story, I get chills all over my body. It will never get old for me. And to this day, I don't know how long I stood there. My children kind of went limp the way kids do when they just like get a sense like this is an impossible situation. There's no complaining here. And I don't know how long we stood there, but eventually, somehow, I was able to get my kids in the car. I remember driving home and somehow getting them fed and bathed into bed. And although I was married at the time, my ex-husband he would work till after the kids got home every night, one of the reasons the marriage ended. And so I was alone. And I got my kids to bed and I walked into my bedroom and I sat on my bed and I looked out the window, which was this big kind of picture window. And all you could see was the blackness of the night and the stars in the sky. And somewhere in that moment, I surrendered. And I said, mess with me, don't mess with my kids. I do not know if Dr. Sarno is right with all this mind-body stuff and all this complicated stuff that it's hard to understand and believe. And I don't know if I need spinal fusion surgery like the doctors say that would put me 6 weeks in a body cast and a rod in my spine and limit my mobility for life. I don't know. But one thing I know is I will do anything. And I call that the gift of desperation. And some people use it as an acronym for God, because I will tell you that it is beautiful to be out of ideas. And I called Dr. Sarno's office. At the time, he was still in practice in New York City. And I made an appointment. It was incredibly expensive. It was money I did not have easily because he was in a hospital for 50 years, 50, that he never got a referral from inside the building. Because his work didn't make money for anyone. It didn't use the surgical model, it didn't use the big pharma model, and it didn't use the medical model. And those doctors in that office were not interested in referring people down to Dr. John Sarno. So his prices were very high because he didn't take insurance because he was just doing this sort of boutique practice. So I paid the money and I sat down with him. Now, I don't know if you, in your friendship with Howard, ever heard about the personality of Dr. John Sarno. But he was a really kind of hilarious dude. Okay. So he was probably about 5'4", 5'5". He was Italian. He wore the long lab coat. So it went down to about his ankles. And he was a gruff fellow. He was no joke. He was all business. And so I had written in this very typical A student way I did, this novel of when my back would hurt. It hurts when I move like this and when I bend like this and when I pick. And I mean, I spent time. Yes. I spent time on this thing. And so I walk in, I slide it across the table from him and he picks up my folder and he says, what is this? And I said, oh, it's just all the deal of my back and how it feels. And he said, okay. He did not lose my gaze and he took it and he threw it in the garbage can. And it was like this metal, old, like utility garbage can. It went boom. And he goes, let me examine you. And he's a medical doctor. He gave me a full exam. And he said, and he looked at my MRI and he said, oh, I see what's going on in your back. And I go, yeah, it's really bad. Every orthopedic surgeon goes pale. And by the way, that is true. I mean, people freak out when they see it. I have a whole vertebrae that's shattered and replaced with scar tissue. I have stress fractures in the vertebrae above and below. And it looks like it's sitting on itself. I think at some point I don't even have a disc. I don't know. And he said, yeah. He said, it's called spondylolisthesis. It's a normal abnormality. You were probably born with it. It doesn't cause pain. And I said, oh? And he said, this is your problem. You are very angry, aren't you? And I was like, I guess so. Well, how does that matter? And he really explained it to me in ways that I understood, which basically I've kind of touched on. It's just that we live in a mind-body system. Sometimes we feel things in our hearts and sometimes we feel things in our bodies, and they are literally interchangeable. And when I lecture, oftentimes I say, what I'm teaching you is something that you already believe. Who among us has not had a stressful day and gotten a headache? An emotional stimuli that leads to a physical reaction. Who among us has not gotten bad news and lost an appetite? Emotional stimuli leading to physical reaction. What's the most obvious emotional stimuli that leads to a physical reaction? When you get really, really, really sad, what happens to you?
I mean, I want to eat bad things. I cry. Yes.
Water falls out of your face.
Yes.
Like sometimes when people really struggle to believe, well, how can an emotional stimuli lead to a physical reaction?
Yes.
And I go, every time you cry. Yes, you could cry because someone hit you in the knee with a hammer. You could, but most of the time you cry because you're watching, a sad TikTok. So I mean, let's be honest here. We all know that emotional stimuli can lead to physical reactions, but when things get chronic, all of that goes out the window because chronic pain is an epidemic of fear, and fear overrides reason. And that is what people need to understand. And so he explained this to me, and I set forth on understanding what I needed to do. So I always say there's 3 facets of my work: believe, do the work, and patience and kindness for yourself. So believe is just understanding what's going on in your body, what's going on in your mind, the dance, the beautiful dance actually between the mind and the body, where your brain and your nervous system are only seeking to protect you with your physical affliction, because in its estimation, your emotional repressed world, which is the place where our stored trauma lives, where our unresolved stuff from childhood, where all the things that get triggered, wherever that lives, is perceived by the nervous system as a greater predator than your physical pain. The migraine keeps you safe. You lay down, you turn off the lights, you cancel plans with Aunt Edna, who always makes you feel bad about yourself. Here you are, safe. Now, I call it safe in the unsafest way because nobody wants to live like that, but your nervous system thinks you're much better off there. How do we convince the nervous system that we're okay feeling our feelings? We have to feel them. How do we feel our feelings? Well, Dr. Sarno explained to me that one of the easiest ways to do that is to journal. Because when you slow your thoughts down to the space in which you can either write them out or type them out, you make space for epiphany. And I said, okay, whatever. I mean, not whatever, like I'll go journal, but it kind of seems too simple to be true. But I said, okay, I really get you. I get you. I believe you. And I think this is the reason for my back pain that's stopping my entire life. I believe you that my spondylolisthesis, just like any bulging disc, just like many, many findings on MRI, is a normal abnormality that doesn't cause pain. I believe you, which was important. And I said, I'm going to go do this journaling work. So do you want me to just keep going on,
Please.
like tell the whole thing to the end?
Please. The other thing I just want to, it's funny with Dr. Sano, it's that 20th century exterior, and I'm so glad that you weren't triggered by the throwing of your journal, which was, wasn't your journal, but your, all that time and effort you put into that. I just know the younger generation would have freaked out, walked out and said, he's bullying me, he's attacking me. I just think it was great that you did not let that get you, because I could see that getting you, where you wrote that's the first thing I thought of when I heard that, was like, I could see a younger person today wouldn't hear him because they would just be freaked out that he threw away the stuff in the barrel. Maybe
not. I can't say, because it would probably depend on the person. But I have to tell you, honestly, my reaction to that was like, all right, then. Like, his confidence was so strong,
right,
and his resolve was, he was so aligned with what he knew was true.
I think you were ready for it, though.
I was ready for it. And true readiness is everything.
And
true readiness
you've got to be ready. And I think that, again, for the younger, I think what's great about you, Nicole, and you're going to keep this going. I think what's great about you, Nicole, is that you're the next generation of Dr. Sano. Rage it's easy for a male. Like, that's what much of it manifests in rage. So I get where he would take that, but I agree with you. It's shame, it's guilt, it's all those other things. And I think that, but your approach is less likely to trigger someone to walk out and receive it. Well, listen, it's just how it is. They're wired in a different way. I see my experiences, and, to people that are wired that way, I say, toughen up a little bit and listen to sometimes this truth, but so you can receive it. But then also, it's so great to have someone like you who can be a lot more, okay, I get it. You're writing your journal, you're dotting all your I's, you're crossing all your T's.
Yeah.
Because you just breathe now, and let's put that to the side. And now me and you really attack the problem. So please continue, Nicole.
So, and I want to just put in a little caveat there, just because, just if we fast forward the story a little bit, which I won't, I'll go back and tell like the good part and the revelatory part. But Dr. Sarno actually became my incredibly close friend and colleague. He ended up referring into my practice when I lived in New York. And he is the loveliest, most gentle soul underneath. But I have to tell you, I have tremendous empathy for his sense of rejection, abandonment, and alienation from the medical community. And I think one of the reasons why he was seen as a bit of a gruff character for those who didn't know him well is because nobody believed him.
Yeah.
And, I am blessed and lucky to be the second generation Sarno, because when people hear me speak, their eyes are a little bit more open because the consciousness of the planet has been much elevated since the years that he really suffered. So I do think there's a reason for all of it.
100%. And by the way, I'm the guy that loves the guy that throws it in the barrel. But again, I'm a guy, and so I'm used to a coach just yelling at me, or whatever, because I know they're coming from a place of love, trying to shake me into where I need to be. But yeah, you see, by the way, that we should have more empathy even to the people, influencers and world leaders and people we idolize. And when we start to see them show their charges, I notice from, say, if I knew a celebrity 15 years ago, and then I see how they are now, I think so much of the outside negativity and stuff has just gotten to them because they're human. So with Dr. Sano, like you could, totally get, like no one, not only didn't they not see him, it was the opposite. No, oh no, we see you, you're a quack.
Exactly.
So you see where, it's just, I get it. And I think it's good for all of us to try to empathize with those people, because you see people start out with these great intentions, and then eventually it just gets chipped away. 100%,
100%. And I think that in order for him to do what he needed to do, he had to get really hard on the outside. And I can't possibly do that because I'm such a love bucket. Like I really am, that what I've had to do is steal myself from haters by saying, I know how many people are getting helped, but I'm going to be honest with you. I get very few haters because I think people see the intention. The intention of the work. They
do. And, here's the thing, Nicole, just giving you a warning. As you grow, it's just how it is. The bigger you get, the more that comes. And I swear, it's just, we know this, and it's something about our society. We just love building people up, and then it's so much fun to tear them down, whatever. I also think that, people need to be ready. I think the generation is more ready now than they've been, but you're always going to get that. And, my thing is when I'm at my best, and by the way, I'm an Italian guy like Dr. Sano, so I'm very reactionary, but when I'm at my best and I see someone who comes from a place of darkness or hatred, I just say, they're not far enough on their journey, and then maybe it's going to be the next life they get there, and I'm just going to kind of move over to someone else,
I am so with you on that. I'm so with you on that.
So let's get back to Nicole.
Let's get back to it.
You got us hanging.
Okay. So I was just doing that to get you guys all at the edge of your seats.
You got me.
So I leave Dr. Sarno's office and I say, okay, it makes sense. If you journal, you make space for these feelings to come up. And he instructed that I should make 3 lists: childhood, daily life, and personality, and just bullet out the things that might be in there, might be in this unconscious reservoir of rage and, shame, sadness, fear, grief, whatever. So I bullet out these lists, and I find myself, and I'm journaling, and I find myself what I call playing my tapes, which is I'm telling the stories of the things that I know upset me, that time in 4th grade, that time in 6th grade, that time when I was in high school, and the this and that happened, and I felt embarrassed, and I'm writing these stories, and like I'm telling the truth. But it just felt like a whole lot of nothing, just to be honest. But I was doing it because I was, once again, being the student. I'm just going to do what I'm told. Mm-hmm. And so I find myself picking the topic of motherhood, which is just a very broad topic under my daily life category. And so I'm writing about motherhood in the same way. I have 2 babies. I wasn't expecting to have a second one so soon. So I have 2 babies in cribs, 2 babies in diapers. This wasn't what I planned. And, my ex-husband, he's always working. So I feel so alone, and I'm tired. I don't get a lot of sleep. So all these things that are normal and understandable and certainly are the truth. And I heard sort of that inner voice, that higher voice saying something to me. And I paused and I paid attention. And the words I heard were, "You're lying." And I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm not lying. This is what's going on in my life right now. And the voice said, you're going to need to go deeper than that if you want to understand what you need to heal. And it was from wherever. I have no idea. I've never been a religious person, but it was just something that it was my deepest knowing.
Nicole, how do we get people, I have some guesses, but how do we get people to be able to, have that voice come in or hear that voice? You know what I mean? Because that was key.
That was key. It was everything.
So you hear that and I go, right? And I go, oh no, how can Kelsey or Maria or, I want to hear more about that.
I have a very specific answer to that. And actually, you're the first person who asked it right at this point in the story. And it makes me realize that this point in the story is why I heard the inner voice, because we must start with the surface truths in order to get to the deeper ones. Okay. So what we do is it's like you start with just telling the story. What's going on right now? I'm having a hard day. The dog is sick. My kid was disrespectful. I'm worried about money. You tell the story and what happens to you. And I believe there's a spiritual aspect to it. You don't have to believe there's a spiritual aspect in order for it to work for you, is that comfort that you can find by telling the surface truth allows for the deeper truth to rise. Something I had no idea was happening at the time, but that is exactly the answer to your question, which is, and I teach this, obviously we're in an interview. There's only so much I'm going to be able to say today, but there's tons of resources to find out about my work. I teach this all the time, which is we start with the surface truths, and the surface truths will bring us to the X marks the spot, and then you have to dig.
And you're not medicating at this point. You're not heavy on the oxys or things like that for your back?
God, no.
Because I would think that would block the voice.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And we can talk about the whole medical model and where it intersects at some point, but I was absolutely not medicating at all at that point.
Good. Okay. Because I think there's people will do the homework. I'm like you. I wasn't when I was, again, at my best, I'm a great student. At my worst, forget it. But I'm like you. Start with the pen and this. Look at you. See, if you can't see, I'm already like taking vociferous notes here.
That was the pad I was using.
Of course, right. There you go. Right. But I think that it's just hearing that voice that really, I'm so glad you heard it. And that's what fascinates me, because I feel like other people might not think that voice will come to them, but maybe if they're clear-headed, if they're breathing, if they do the surface work, like you're saying, it just will happen.
I often tell people life is a behavior modification program. You can never think yourself into better feelings. You must act your way. That is the bottom line. Little actions lead to epiphany. And so the fact that I was sitting there at the desk with my yellow legal pad, making time for myself, getting my child care, right? Having a cup of tea, that it begins the process of opening. And now I'm telling the story. My kids are little. I'm tired. I'm overwhelmed. Not lies. But the voice said, we need to look deeper. And I said, okay. And here's the place, Kevin, where I have to say that my desperation, that moment in the picture window staring out at the stars when I said, I'll do anything, came into play, because I was being invited to do something hard, which is what's underneath all that exhaustion. What's underneath all that discontent? Is it just that you're tired? A lot of people stop right there. And I was willing to do anything. And I asked into my truth. And what came to me was the first line of journal speak, which is the language I teach, ever penned. And that line was, I hate being a mother. And it flowed out of me like the most painful battery acid on my tongue. I mean, what? I said, what? And it said, I hate being a mother. And I just let the pen move on the page. I hate this. It's wrong. It's ruined. I did it wrong. I messed it up. I'm broken. I can't do it anyway. I had the wrong babies. My daughter, she has curly blonde hair. She looks like my ex-husband. She cries in my face. These aren't the right babies. This isn't the right life. Everything is ruined. And I just didn't stop.
And by the way, what I just think of, sorry, Nicole, to interrupt, because I think of your personality as I'm getting to know you. Weren't you even ashamed to admit that, right? Isn't that the worst thing in the world to admit?
Beyond, first of all, let's dial back. At 19, I was told I would never even have these children, okay? Yeah. I had started fantasizing about being a mother when I was 10. all I wanted to do. My mother and I have this joke that when I was a little girl and she said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I used to say, "I want to do nothing like you." Which she
oh my God, hilarious.
Oh, my mother used to love that one. But I didn't see myself beyond motherhood. I didn't know I was going to have this big career and be a therapist and do all this. I thought I was going to have children and stay home with them because it was all I ever wanted. And not that there's anything wrong with that. And when we get to the end of the story, you'll realize that my kids are literally everything to me. And there's nothing I love more than being a mother. But in that moment, for that scared, broken little girl inside, the one who was repressing all that sadness and rage and grief, I had to tell the truth first. And the truth of that little girl, the inner child, which is, I do so much work on this, is I hate this. I'm terrified. I'm screwing it up. I'm doing it wrong. I did it all wrong. And I just didn't stop writing. And then I got another voice. And the voice said, wait. You don't hate your babies and you don't hate being a mother. There's more here. Keep digging, keep digging. And then it moved to my parents. I really went ham on my parents. I hate you. I hate both of you. Oh, no. You made horrible decisions. You ruined me. It's journal speak is a language of a 5-year-old having a temper tantrum. It is not something that anyone ever needs to hear. And when you're done with your journal speak practice, my first instruction is you throw it away. You rip it into a public garbage can. You delete it from your computer. You don't save it on the cloud. This is not language that anyone else would ever understand. It is to set yourself free. One of my old clients used to say, it's like blowing your nose in a tissue, throw it away. You're getting out the gunk. You're not writing the great American novel. And so I was writing, and the rage went to my parents. And then all of a sudden I had this great compassion for my parents my dad was an immigrant. My mother was trying her best. We had terrible money problems. He died young. They were doing what they could. And I did come to compassion, and not everyone does. And you don't need to, by the way, but I did. And then
even maybe, Nicole, if you can't get to compassion, maybe at least empathy. How did they get to this place?
And wouldn't it be great to get to empathy? But I have worked with enough people over the years that have been so wronged, sexual abuse, physical abuse, terrible neglect, that they can't get to empathy or compassion. And I say, then just know what happened. Then just know what happened.
Does it help for them to know, let's say if that person were abused or that person were, does that help at all?
That can certainly build empathy and compassion. And I want to tell people that the spoiler alert to the end of all of this for you, because we're just hearing my story, but for you, is that inner peace. You will be able to understand everything that happened and feel in alignment with it. And it's a long journey, and it's simple, but it's not easy, but it is absolutely the end. And when you get there, you also have absolutely no chronic pain. So this is the truth. So anyway, I know I'm taking forever to get there.
No, it's okay, because it's all so helpful. I know it's helping me. So please, Nicole, continue.
Okay, thank you. So then the rage moved to the person that really needed to hear it, is that I was rageful at myself. You weak baby, you can't raise these kids. Everybody can raise kids. You stupid idiot. You couldn't figure this out. Your father was right. You've always been a failure. All of it, but I didn't stop. I didn't get scared. I didn't press up that palm of resistance. And what we resist persists. And I didn't resist it. And I let it come, and I let it come. And I finished that sit down exercise, and I don't know how long it took, with tearful compassion for myself. Just a soft, sweet baby, just trying the best I could, just doing the best with what I was given. And I just felt this process beginning for myself. And I woke up the next morning and my back pain was 80% gone, never to return. Within the next couple months, I worked with Dr. Sarno on the brain conditioning that was causing the last 20%. And within a few months, I had never had back pain again, not for one day. I had a third child, exercised till the day she was born. I'm almost 49 years old. I'm in incredible shape. There is nothing about me that is affected by this normal abnormality in my back, and it is because of my understanding of this mind-body connection. And I cannot speak more passionately about the importance for every person suffering to know that this is what's happening in you.
So you get to the place where you then blame yourself. Then you, of course, forgive yourself because you realize you're just a child trying your best. Right. You throw away the journal right away. Just
right away.
Right away. Okay, good.
Destroy it immediately upon finishing. Burn upon reading.
Burn upon reading. Great. And then and you immediately start noticing relief. Now, is this a practice that you have to keep going back to?
Yes. Okay. So what I like to say when I tell my story is a very, kind of hyperbolic, exciting story, but this is just human life. We all need to mind our mind-body connection the way we mind our physical health. What I say about your mind-body connection is kind of like if you wanted six-pack abs and somebody said, yeah, okay, this is how you get it. You go to the gym and you do these exercises. And if you care about having six-pack abs, there's a recipe. And if you do the work, you'll get them. You can't go and watch people at the gym. You can't imagine the gym. You can't decide. You could, but you're not going to get the abs. And so what I'm saying is this work, if you want this mind, body health, if you want to get rid of this chronic condition that you're suffering from, or get more energy, or find more joy for life, or have better relationships, or get pregnant, or have preventative stuff like it, I do believe this work significantly prevents cancer and other things that afflict us. It's not a cure for cancer, but I work with cancer patients all the time, specifically actually in the past breast cancer, because I know you mentioned that. And I have worked with people that have had incredible recoveries. Now, I can't say whether or not this work was a factor or not. I'm not a mind reader and I'm not a doctor, but I will tell you, I've watched it help people go through chemotherapy without losing their hair. I mean, there's just incredible things I've seen from this work when you understand the dance between the mind and the body. So this wasn't the last time I journaled, because I had a long road of I started getting migraines at one point. At the time I was speaking on the Sarno panel at NYU, because I worked with him for years speaking on his panels at the college. And I was sitting on stage once and I had been getting these terrible migraines, and somebody was asking me a question and I just stopped myself in my tracks. And I remember I had the mic in my hand. I go, I just realized I don't need to get these headaches anymore. It was a real journey of discovery for me. I had to understand it wasn't just about back pain. I had to understand that it was a sort of like your body is like a pinball machine. And if this repressed emotional world is at the point where it's going to keep spilling over, it's going to be like a bing, bing, headache, and then shoulder pain, and then back pain, and then a stomach thing. But when you do the work, when you understand the belief, which is what I'm explaining, and I have so many resources, because sometimes you have to sit in the belief. Sometimes you have to marinate in the belief. I have a podcast and people often say they just walk every day and listen to an episode of the podcast, and little by slowly the belief kind of comes into them and they know they can do this for themselves. The journal speak practice, I assign people a 30-minute a day practice when they're at the beginning. You certainly don't need to do it every day for the rest of your life, but I assign it at the beginning because you really need to get your nervous system from sustained fight or flight to sustained rest and repair. And that is something that takes consistency, just like the six-pack abs. You got to show up and you have to do the work. And the process is just a 20-minute journal speak practice followed by a 10-minute meditation. Any loving kindness meditation to sit with the compassion. And some people don't come to it naturally. So just to feel patience and kindness for yourself and to know I'm doing my best. I'm a human being. I have frailties and flaws just like anyone else. And I'm doing this work to save my own life. And so that 30 minutes a day is an absolute game changer. And I've been watching it change people's lives for 20 years.
And this is every day for the rest of your life, or is there like a point where you can?
What I would say is any kind of spiritual work, anything that you guys are teaching on Better Together, it's to get a toolkit, right? So you get a toolkit and you find this and you find that and you find this, and there you have your toolkit. Journal Speak is a tool in your toolkit, just like a lot of things. When you get yourself out of chronic pain, which happens for some people very quickly and for some people slowly. It really depends on how much trauma you've had, what your personality is like, how much you carry perfectionism and goodism and needing to be seen as a good person, how codependent you are. Mm-hmm. There's so many different factors, but no matter, even if you scored 10 on all the things I just said, there's still hope for you as long as you are willing to do the work with belief and patience and kindness for yourself. Then it just becomes a tool in your toolkit. Like today, in my life, I'm almost 49. I'm a parent of 3. I'm doing all this crazy work around the world. There will be days where I wake up and I'll get I call it the wing. It's like, when your scapula hurts.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's like annoying. You can't move your neck. And I'll go, oh, all right. I obviously have a lot going on. It's a journal speak day, and I get down to it. And I have a lot of different practices and prompts and stuff that I teach. So I just listen to my own work. I'm a product of my product, and I do my work. And maybe sometimes it takes me a few days. I had a really interesting thing happen to me about a year or two ago where I got something called burning mouth syndrome, something that I had never heard of. And now it's almost like when you're pregnant, all you do is see pregnant women. Now everyone has burning mouth. I hear about it all the time. But I got this burning mouth syndrome. And I'm a human being like anyone else. So what did I do? I ran to the doctor and I said, I'm dying. My whole mouth feels like it's on fire. What's wrong with me? And she said, well, let's get blood work. Fine. I believe in medicine when you need it. And she said, okay, all your blood work is normal. She said, some people who have this, try this mouthwash. And I'm listening to her and she goes, but you know what's really crazy? I have this other patient who has terrible burning mouth syndrome. She's been everywhere. She's been to Hopkins. She flew up to the Mayo Clinic. She's done all these things. And you know what they keep telling her? And I said, what? And she said, they keep telling her it's psychological. And I go, oh, all right, thanks, bye. Did the journal speak? And you know what came out?
What?
I'm not being heard. I'm desperate to share this message. Yeah. And all I want to do is shout it from the rooftops and no one's listening. And I think part of that was right around when Dr. Sarno died, because he died a couple summers ago at the age of 94. And I felt like now it's like all on me. Not that I'm the only one in the world who's doing this work, but it felt like a tremendous pressure that all these people are suffering and I need to get and as soon as I got that, the burning mouth went away and never came back. Wow. This is real, guys. Like I know this, even when I say it, I know it sounds crazy. This is physical brain science.
It doesn't sound crazy to me. It's really about, we do a lot of talk on our show, but we do a Regular Guy Friday episode, Kelsey and I, where it's just, we just say we're regular people and in a regular world. But we were talking last week about awareness. And we keep hearing from super successful people who come on the show. We have billionaires, we have healers, we have all world-class people like you, Nicole. And it just, I marvel at the awareness. And I think if you can have that awareness, which is, like you said, calm, you were there, you had your tea, the kids were being taken care of somewhere else. Obviously, you wanted this to work too, but it's so much about awareness. I've always said with any problem, you're halfway there if you can know, what the problem is or why you're having it. We're halfway
awareness.
home.
I say that all the time. Awareness is the first step. I find myself, because I have this Instagram account where I put out a lot of information, and I find myself writing that to almost every person who's like, but wait. I say, no, awareness, start with awareness.
And I think it's finding ways to love yourself enough to quiet everything around you. Maria has a really hard time. I mean, she's like a little kid. I have to put her to bed. I literally have to go. By the way, Kelsey's now the same way. I have an office. It's going to sound weird. We have a recliner in there, but I'll be like, get on the recliner. Here's the electric blanket. Just stop.
Totally. Absolutely.
Just, with Maria, it's the same thing. Like, stop worrying about, this one and that one and the dog and mom and dad and this and that. And, and she's at her best when she has these tremendous breakthroughs when it gets quiet. And this is someone of means. And so my heart really goes out to the people who don't have the means, who, are working day and night to feed their children or themselves or care for sick people.
Yeah.
So I think it starts with them finding a way to carve out that 30 minutes, like you said, 20 minutes to write, 10 minutes just of quiet. But, it's for such a greater good, not just, it's hard to reach people too, Nicole, like the people like you and a lot of the people on the Heal Squad who listen to this show, because they put everyone else first. So right?
Yes, and that is actually a big. So one thing that I didn't mention in terms of this work is that when you do the original lists in order to figure out what you need to journal about, it's childhood, daily life, and personality. There are certain personality characteristics, and Dr. Sarno talks about this a lot, and I know Stern talks about this a lot, of people that are typical to get this kind of more, the more difficult mind-body stuff, meaning like the back pain, the neck pain, the shoulder pain, the hip pain, the migraines, the fibromyalgia.
The autoimmune diseases.
What's the symptoms of autoimmune disease, exactly.
Yes.
The type of people that get this are usually people pleasers, good doers, meaning like everybody needs to be taken care of before I'm taken care of. Codependent. I'm not okay unless you're okay. I want your feelings to be okay, and then your feelings become my feelings. Perfectionist. I'm not good unless I get an A, unless everybody sees me as not making a mistake. There are very specific types of people, and oftentimes these people think that they're doing a service to themselves by being so good,
Yes.
by putting everyone else first. And in fact, as Dr. Sarno would say, they're very angry. They're very angry, and that anger has no space in their self-definition. There is no place in the way they view themselves for that anger, and because there's no place for it, it must be repressed.
That's right.
And repressed feelings must come out somewhere.
And I see it a lot in cancer, Nicole.
Yes, I know.
My dad
I know.
was a people
Yes.
pleaser, and it's the anger. And I see a lot of people, Maria's mom, the givers of the world. I see it come out in cancer. You know, I know it comes out in all those other things, but I've seen it at the extreme of cancer, and that's why I always say when people reach out, I say one of the first things to do, you know, along with your diet and maybe holistic treatments, is get to the core, get to the psychology.
Yes.
Why? Where there's more there. Get in therapy, and now like follow Nicole Sachs. But I think these are just such incredible triggers, and all the things you just mentioned. It's those things that we carry. Thank you so much for today, and I look forward to many more of these.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so great.
You too.
This podcast and all related content published or distributed by or on behalf of Maria Menounos or mariamenounos.com is for informational purposes only and may include information that is general in nature and that is not specific to you. Any information or opinions expressed or contained herein are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice, nor to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any disease, condition, illness, or injury, and you should consult the healthcare professional of your choice regarding all matters concerning your health, including before beginning any exercise, weight loss, or healthcare program. If you have or suspect you may have a healthcare emergency, please contact a qualified healthcare professional for treatment. Any information or opinions provided by a guest expert or host featured within website or on company's podcast are their own, not those of Maria Menounos or the company. Accordingly, Maria Menounos and the company cannot be responsible for any results or consequences or actions you may take based on information or opinions.